Hey guys, this is a special episode that we did on Mortal Kombat Conquest. Matthew Dawkins reached out to us he's really excited to talk about this show. And we ended up talking so much that it's now a two-parter episode. So today you're going to get part one of the episode where we do eventually talk about the show near the end. And then next week you get the second half, which covers the rest of the episodes that we talked about. So for context, if you're curious about following along, we did episodes 1, 10, 15, and 22. So with that, enjoy this super bonus experience of Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Hey, Killian, here is Sub-Zero. Now, Plane Zero. My name is Matthew Dawkins. Welcome to the Genreless Podcast.
I'm Chris Spivey. I was tricked into being here.
And I'm Eddie Webb, and today we're going to talk about, not The Running Man, but Mortal Kombat Conquest here on Genreless. Hello and welcome to a special episode of Genreless where we welcome back our good friend of the show, Matthew Dawkins.
I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And you actually have now a unique distinction. First of all, you're the first person to come back 3 times on the podcast, but also you're the first guest to come to us with something you wanted to talk about.
Revenge! To quote Michael Payne, A Fish Called Wanda.
Thank you for phrasing that. Having made us watch this, would we count Matthew as a friend?
I tipped my hand real early, but I actually had fun with this. It is not good, but I did have fun with this. In fact, as a measure of quality is not the right word. As a measure of the how this show is perceived, I am now showing my friends that these are two of the DVDs I have bought of Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Yeah.
You'll notice that they look nothing like each other. Turns out they're made by completely different companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they present a number of episodes. They're not in order on the DVDs. They're just kind of which ones had the same rough vibe.
Yeah, I owned one of those DVDs. I don't think literally, unless you picked it up secondhand from someone I sold it to. The Quan Chi one, I did actually own.
That's the only one I haven't been able to find. Actually, is the Quan Chi one.
I think that was my entry into Mortal Kombat Conquest was via Quan Chi.
Yeah, and so like it's fascinating because like this is a show that for a lot of reasons has really disappeared. There's been one complete series re-release that was done as a print on demand for Warner Brothers for like a year, and you can't find that anymore. There was no the UK is the one that has otherwise the most re-releases, and again it's been these kind of weird compilation DVDs that like talk about 4 hours of martial arts action for £2 kind of. Here's something cheap that no one cares about that we can license to get some cheap DVDs out the door.
And what martial arts?
Yeah, and like I did some looking up online of like ranking Mortal Kombat media, and Conquest never even shows up on those lists.
That's unfair.
It's just not there.
Before either of you get too much into it, if someone is looking to find this masterpiece, I discovered last night after I'd already watched it through other means that it is in fact on Max. If you have Max in the US,
is it really?
Watch it there, because I was looking around last night and that's where it popped up again. Max. If you have a subscription, you could watch it.
And that's why HBO is known as the home of quality TV, because it hosts such shows as Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Well, it came out with originals like the epic show Dream On, which was about a divorcee writer and his misadventures looking for action. The entire premise of the show that ran for 7 seasons, I think.
7 seasons?
Something I'm seeing.
And that's 6 seasons more than Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Yeah.
There's no justice in the artistic world.
Since you brought this to our attention, Matthew, let me give us a little context of what is Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Oh, well, what isn't it, Eddie? So, in the 90s, I was a huge fan of fighting games. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Soul Blade, as it was over here, and so on and so forth. And whether that was via the console or in the arcade.
Mhm.
And being a teenager in the late 90s, of course, Mortal Kombat was very much the cool thing.
Yep.
Now, Mortal Kombat, the movie, came out, and despite what people may claim, it is not a good movie. But what it is a fair representation of the fighting game. It has a certain amount of gore. It has a thumping techno soundtrack, which I think is probably its
awesome.
strongest selling point. At a time when techno was pretty... I'm not going to suggest Mortal Kombat was single-handedly responsible for techno's popularity, but it was among a certain audience. I think it brought attention to the techno musical genre. I'll stake my claim on that. And Mortal Kombat was followed by Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Now, the video games all did substantially better than the movies. And Mortal Kombat Annihilation is a particular example of what happens when movies go wrong.
Yes.
However, this podcast isn't about Mortal Kombat Annihilation. It's about what followed that. And that
It could be, because unbeknownst to you, Matthew, I suggest to Eddie that we do a retrospective and we do both Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat Annihilation in conjunction with Conquest, just to compare them, so that everyone can see that the movie was better than the series and the sequel. Ooh.
Okay.
I will agree with you that the first movie is better than the show, but Annihilation's really bad, man.
I remember being so excited for Annihilation when it came out because I mean in both meanings of that phrase. Before the movie, I was so excited for Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and after the movie, I was just so excited for Annihilation. Just wanted it to be over. No, I remember when Mortal Kombat 3 came out, and then it was Ultimate Mortal Kombat Trilogy. That game was pretty much the same game repackaged 3 times with a slightly larger roster of characters each time, and for different platforms. And Mortal Kombat Annihilation was that game in movie form. And the reason it was so appealing to me as a teenager was it was the possibility of not just seeing the core Mortal Kombat roster of, 8 characters. There's not many in the first Mortal Kombat, as in the Mortal Kombat movie, but you get to see all the ones introduced in 2 and 3 as well, or a lot of them. So you get your reptiles and Ermacs and Reigns and so on. And it won't just be ninja characters, but, Shiva and so on. And then, of course, it fell flat as movies with far too many characters with not enough to do. Movies do that. So Mortal Kombat Conquest is kind of like Mortal Kombat Annihilation in that regard. It does the same thing as Mortal Kombat Annihilation. It tries to put as much as it can from Mortal Kombat within a certain, I guess, narrow window, and then spread it across 22 episodes instead of confining it to an hour and a half. And so in some ways, it succeeds where Annihilation fails, because it gives secondary characters some depth and story. And on the other hand, because it has none of the gore, because it has none of the production values, and I use that term loosely as Annihilation, it also fails where Annihilation slightly succeeds. But yeah, Conquest as a series is a 22 episode long TV show that appeared on TNT in America. It was, I think, on Bravo in the UK, and I could be wrong there, but I think it was on Bravo. And the show was abruptly cancelled after the first season came to an end. It starred a number of actors who no one would have been familiar with at the time, and most people wouldn't be familiar with now.
I will push back slightly for the lead of the show, because if you are a fan of Disney or of Brandy, you would know that the lead is the prince in Cinderella that stars Brandy and Whitney Houston.
Well,
oh wow!
So the only way was up for Paolo. But
Which is
interestingly,
a great Cinderella movie that I've shown my daughter multiple times. I think it's her favorite version.
Well, interestingly, and obviously we'll dive into Conquest in the episodes that have been selected for us to look at, and some of its successes and failings. But on the subject of the cast, even though there are many a TV series that's cancelled over after the first season, and the actors do go on to absolutely nothing after. Or they fade into, I guess, ignominy.
But Christina Lorcan became the Terminator.
Exactly. Conquest. Yeah, Conquest doesn't actually have that bad a track record. Because, Christina Lorcan, I would imagine her greatest or most well-known role is as the Terminator, the T3. And she, I think, then later appears in Uwe Boll's Blood Rain, which is questionable.
Oh, that's where I've seen her from. Okay.
Yeah.
But it was still a movie.
She in a TV series? Was she Painkiller Jane, or am I thinking of someone else that was on the Sci-Fi Network a bajillion years ago?
You may be right. And I think the real breakout star, who oddly is appearing as an actor more in the last 5 years than in the 20 years between Mortal Kombat Conquest and now, is Daniel Bernhardt, who plays the character of Ciro in Conquest, because he was a stunt performer. He was an actor in Conquest. He appears as one of the agents in Matrix Reloaded, though I don't think he has any dialogue. I think it's mainly for fight scenes. He's a background smith.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But in the last 5 years or so, he has appeared as a speaking character in movies like Nobody, the one with Bob Odenkirk. He, of course, gets in a fight scene in that. It's a John Wick-style movie, but it's very, very good. He was also in the TV show Barry with Bill Hader, where Bill Hader plays an assassin. There seems to be a fair recurring theme here for Daniel Bernhardt.
Someone would say he plays an actor playing an assassin, playing an actor.
Yeah, like
That's actually an assassin.
Right.
But my point is, Daniel Bernhardt is becoming, I would suggest, recognizable 20 years after this TV show. And then you have people like Jeff Meek, who played Raiden and Shao Kahn, who has had a pretty prolific career in theatre. And so on. We could go down the list. They've all appeared in certain things. Paolo Montalban is still a very active theatrical and musical performer.
Mm-hmm. All right, then. If you've got a great bench of knowledge, I want to test your might and see if you can tell me what other major motion pictures or good series that Jen has been in. The love interest, Guinevere.
You know what? Because we only selected her for one episode, I didn't look her up. But now I am picturing her in my mind. So let's think. Can I put Jen, our damsel in distress, who dies
her tour de force of acting left me stunned, so I wanted to see if you could find anyone that would hire her after the show.
You know what? I could be really reductive because I know that this TV show contains a hell of a lot of playmates, but I'm not. I'm going to suggest that she retired from acting, opened up a ski lodge in Switzerland, and it has gone from strength to strength in the years passing. What am I incorrect, Chris?
I don't know. I was actually asking because I was curious, because you've done homework and research, which I will speak for me, that I rarely ever do. So I wanted to see if you could pull that one out.
Well, I'm going to try to find her on IMDb right now.
Yeah, a lot of the actors in this don't have Wikipedia pages, which of course is the first port of call for the vast majority.
We could leave it as a homework assignment for our listeners, so we're just like school.
The problem is Eddie is the listener.
Right.
So the actor's name is Jennifer Renton.
She has appeared in one other movie, which was A Date with Darkness, which was a TV movie in 2003, and she was Woman in Bar.
There you go. Yes, she is known for Mortal Kombat Conquest and A Date with Darkness, the trial and capture of Andrew Luster, which, honestly, I think Andrew
That's a
Luster's
name.
name was a giveaway that it was going to be A Date with Darkness, wasn't it? Here we go. Jennifer Renton is... I could be a completely different Jennifer Renton, but I'm going to suggest not. Is an addictions and community health professional, community resource liaison, and recovery navigator. So good for her.
Awesome.
If that is her, and I believe it is, judging from the photos, you can find anyone online. Then she decided to pursue a more honest career than acting.
Good for her.
That's amazing. I love that. But now that you've also managed to do that in under 2 minutes, we actually have another business that we're opening. It's a genre detective agency where it's going to be the three of us that will track anyone down for the low cost of $10,000 per minute of our time. It's mostly Matthew searching, Eddie and I profiting off Matthew's hard work.
Well,
right.
I mean, that is how Eddie and I work right now.
Pretty much. I mean, it's the version of the historical relationship between America and England. Okay, so
a real question before Eddie gives us back on topic. How well does this show actually line up with the lore of Mortal Kombat? I'm very vaguely familiar with Mortal Kombat.
Well, so the lore of Mortal Kombat only really comes into being, I would suggest, after this TV show is made. So an awful lot is... Oddly, in fact, I would say that there's a game, an obscure Mortal Kombat game, obscure to mainstream audiences, not Mortal Kombat fans, called Mortal Kombat Mythologies, which is not good.
Yeah.
And it is the first Mortal Kombat game that actually starts delving into there really being lore. Anything else is text on screen that sort of whizzes by in the first few Mortal Kombat games. It's the first one that delves into the sort of past of the Lin Kuei, Sub-Zero's Ninja Clan. It delves into the past of Quan Chi, who was a new character in that video game.
Mm-hmm.
And had more or less not appeared in any of the games. So Mortal Kombat Conquest was Quan Chi's first big outing, really, as he doesn't appear in any of the movies, and hadn't been... I don't think he'd been a playable character when this came out. I'd have to check when Mortal Kombat 4 came out, but regardless, it doesn't. It doesn't really adhere to a lot of the background. The greatest reason is because of its pseudo-historical setting. The Mortal Kombat video games that had come out up to 4 were set in a loosely modern era, which is why you have characters like Liu Kang and Johnny Cage, and Sonya Blade, I guess, are the most representative of modern characters in the first 2 games. And then with the third game, you actually get a cop that throws grenades at his enemies in the form of Stryker. And cyborgs like Sector and Cyrax and things like
Jax.
that. Jax, of course, Special Forces with his metal arms. So it very much frames it as, even though there are ninjas in this world, it is still modern or near future. Mortal Kombat Conquest is intended, I think, to be historic in a roughly, let's call it 16th, 17th century Eurasia. Let's say Eurasia. That might cover some of our casting decisions later.
Right.
The ties to the plot, some of it is close because you have characters in the correct position. Shao Kahn is the Lord of the Outworld. Shang Tsung is his chief sorcerer. Kung Lao is the champion of Earthrealm, which was in the background of Mortal Kombat 1.
Right.
There's certain holes in the Mortal Kombat mythos, I suppose, like Earthrealm isn't subject to Shao Kahn, but the only Earth champion of Mortal Kombat prior to Liu Kang is Kung Lao, who was killed by Shang Tsung. So what's been going on in that interim? It doesn't really make any sense. So, yeah, it has some correct connectivity to even the lore as it's presented now, but there's an awful lot of wind in this TV show where they are trying to fill up 22 episodes with any old. Now, the episodes we focused on are episodes that have characters from the video games in.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest about half of the episodes, while they all have Kung Lao and the vast majority have Shang Tsung in his incredibly limited set, most of them don't have characters from the video game. So it's villain of the week. It's, this is a ninja, this is a baron, this is a bandit lord, or this is a strange sorcerer. So you can pretty much ignore a lot of the show. But for real lore hounds for Mortal Kombat, it can be interesting to look at the, I guess, speculative background of characters like Scorpion and Reptile, and how Quan Chi would react encountering Shang Tsung and things like that. So I don't think it's considered canon these days. In fact, I would put my hat on it not being considered canon. It certainly tried, but I don't think the mythos was really established solidly enough at this point for it to be canonical. There just wasn't enough there. In subsequent years, you've got another 10 Mortal Kombat video games that have done a lot more than any of the movies or this TV show have done.
Right. It's actually, coincidentally, I've been reading up on Mortal Kombat before Matthew and I had another conversation about this, so it wasn't like Matthew sent me down a rabbit hole, although that certainly helped. Basically, the first 4 games were really just, this game is popular, we like kung fu movies, so let's do some stuff that feels like that. That was the first game. Then they made the second game, which really got a lot of government attention on the franchise, because it was the first game really held up as this is a game that needs to be censored, and in fact, this is the game that led to the rating system that we now have on video games. And then 3 came out to capitalize on 2. That was a botched release, and they put 4 out in the arcades, and that was all like in the span of like 5 years. Right?
Yeah,
it was a really fast time period. The movies in
Do you
there.
know more about what happened with the release of 3? You said it was a botched release. I'm just curious.
Oh yeah. So this is deeply fascinating to me. So this is Midway at the time. Midway was originally traditionally a pinball company. They had been moving pretty steadily into video games, and actually I think they just merged with Williams. They're Midway Williams at this point. And so the model for arcades at that time, particularly in the U.S., was you wanted to move as many physical units as possible to an arcade or a location, and then the arcade would try to get their investment back through the quarters. Right, so they're constantly trying to get hotter games out there. So first Mortal Kombat comes and goes, does surprisingly well. Second Mortal Kombat does even better. So third Mortal Kombat was kind of just a fait accompli, and they're like, you have 6 months to get Mortal Kombat 3 done. It wasn't done, so they literally were selling empty cabinets to arcades. And you buy the cabinet now, put a sign on it that says coming soon, and then we'll sell you the boards to put into the machine later. They did not manage to hit their deliverables, so they did a good enough version, MK3 V1, that went out, and it was janky. It was bad. They did a couple of updates, and again, this is 1996 to 7, so there wasn't like over the wire update. You had to buy a whole new board and ship it out, and oftentimes it was at the arcade producer's cost. The owners didn't have to pay for these, so then burn whole new boards and send those out, and it just kept not doing it. Finally, they had to do it took 6 months to do an actual complete version, and it was such an overhaul. That's when Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was released. The arcade tried to position it as, here's a whole new game akin to Super Street Fighter Championship Edition style.
Yeah.
And that was so from what I understand from people who play in tournaments, basically you play MK1, MK2, and Ultimate MK3. No one plays vanilla MK3 because it's just so broken. Ultimate MK3 is considered the only quote unquote canonical version of the game. And then 4 was because Tekken and Virtual Fighter had moved into 3D fighting. It was right before Soul Calibur or Soul Blade. And so I was like, we have to do 3D fighter. And again, it was just terrible because basically they had to reinvent a whole new programming language and software, and they had a year to do it in, and it wasn't enough time. So 4 was kind of the end. And on top of that, arcades were fading anyway. So by 2000, that arcade business model was more or less done. And so MK4 is kind of the end of the arcade era. But again, like it's a 6-year span we're talking about. The Mortal Kombat went from nothing, like if you're prior to Mortal Kombat, basically Street Fighter was the only real game in that genre.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat came out because they said, well, we need to diversify our portfolio. So let's do a fighting game and see how that goes. And so while a lot of the fighting games are seen as Street Fighter clones, they're technically really Mortal Kombat clones.
It's Mortal Kombat 3, it has some odd similarities to Street Fighter 3, which is probably, again, if you're a Street Fighter fan, a Street Fighter purist, you will find something to appreciate in Street Fighter 3. If you're a mainstream fan of fighting games, you will think Street Fighter 3 was where the series completely botched. And they re-released that 3 times, just the same as Mortal Kombat 3 was re-released 3 times with different rosters.
Yep.
And oddly, each company, Capcom and Midway, did this thing where they wanted to essentially move the timeline or reorient the game and be a little more experimental with their rosters. As one thing, they also added new features, like in Mortal Kombat 3, you had like a rage meter or something. I can't remember exactly what it was called. In Street Fighter 3, you had new break powers and things like that. And they both made an error that I think we're all familiar with in role-playing. If we look at something like V5, which we've all worked on, Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, the idea of holding content back or saying, this is our new vision of a game, therefore we want to move on from that. The problem is there's certain fans who like playing Scorpion.
Right.
In fact, there's certain fans who say that Scorpion is the archetypal character in the game. Liu Kang is boring. Scorpion is Mortal Kombat, and he's not a character in Mortal Kombat 3 in the base edition. There are certain characters who identify, or pretty much in almost an era before fandom becomes what we consider it in an online world. Sub-Zero is a masked ninja. In Mortal Kombat 3, he is not wearing a mask.
Yep.
It's sometimes really tiny things like that players of these games who really get into the world or just develop a favorite character and then find out come the release of the 3rd iteration, that character isn't the person I imagined anymore, or that character just is absent. And same thing with Street Fighter 3. I think you only have Ryu, Ken, and Chun-Li, I want to say. In fact, I'm not even sure Chun-Li is in the original release of Street Fighter 3. I think she may have come in one of the reissues.
When does Guile show up in Street Fighter?
Well,
2.
Guile appears in Street Fighter 2, and he is utterly absent from 3. So, yeah, Street Fighter 3 basically cuts out all but 2, I think, of the original Street Fighter 2. I guess oxymoron original Street Fighter 2, but most people see Street Fighter 2 as the one.
Yeah, Street Fighter 1 is very much a prototype.
Yeah, it's not a good game.
No.
But yeah, point being, this TV show, I think this TV show came out when Mortal Kombat 4 was in arcades. I don't know if it had been released on the N64 at this point. I would hazard a guess, no. But it was probably released to promote Mortal Kombat 4's upcoming release. And Mortal Kombat 4 was another bomb. I think it sold, but critically it was not popular because it did away with motion capture. It was the first 3D Mortal Kombat game. It was more cartoonish. And it's a direction that, while they have revisited it occasionally with some of the mid-2000s releases, they haven't really gone back to that Mortal Kombat 4 well. So Conquest is at an odd time. where Mortal Kombat's shine has kind of come off the apple
Right.
a little. None of that is to excuse Conquest's failings. It could have been a much better TV show.
No,
Doesn't.
but it is fascinating because you're right, because we're at an awkward part also just culturally, right, where Mortal Kombat had always distinguished itself by the idea of there was a story somewhat here.
Yeah.
Um, Granted, most of it was in what is known in arcades as the attract screen, which is the stuff that plays to get people over to the machine to put the quarters in.
Mm-hmm.
They would show you little snippets of story one, and of course the story at the end when you finish it, there's a bit of a story there. And the idea that each of these games progressed what we in the RPG used to call meta plot was distinctive, and a lot of other games picked up on that. So the idea that Mortal Kombat had a mythology was actually really interesting and fascinating at the time. But also, we're now at a point where this has moved from a few games to a franchise, and they don't know what to do with that. For example, in 1985, there was a Mortal Kombat novel written by Jeff Rovin, which is utterly non-canonical. Jars not only with Mortal Kombat Conquest, but also jars with itself and the other games.
Who's the central character?
Liu Kang. No.
Okay.
No, Kung Lao. Sorry, Kung Lao is Kung Lao's the main character for the first third of the book, but then he dies. And then we find out that the Kung Lao we actually see in the games is a descendant of that Kung Lao who's possessed by the ghost of his father.
Yes, there are two Kung Laos in the history of Mortal Kombat. The first Kung Lao has never been playable in any Mortal Kombat. He has been depicted visually as a potentially playable character, but he has never actually appeared as playable, not even with hacks. And it's one of these Sheng Long style, to use a Street Fighter reference. There's a quote in an end screen of Street Fighter where I think if you're beaten by Ryu, it says you must beat Sheng Long to stand a chance.
Mm.
And it was just a bad translation of some Japanese. And there wasn't a character called Sheng Long. There never was.
Mm-hmm.
But the fandom glommed onto it and assumed there must be a really tough fighter in the background of Street Fighter called Sheng Long.
Right.
They ended up adding it. They ended up creating Sheng Long 20 years later to finally sate the fandom. In Mortal Kombat, you've got that with the original Kung Lao. And oddly, I don't know I doubt it's intended, but oddly, Mortal Kombat Conquest is probably the only depiction of the original Kung Lao.
Yeah.
Because of the historic setting. I don't think they considered it at that point, but I think that's kind of retroactively what it becomes, and it explains what happens to him at the end of the TV series, and why he's not going to be in the future.
Wasn't there a Mortal Kombat adventure game featuring Kung Lao and someone else that you could play?
I believe so, but I think that is modern.
Mythologies.
I think that's modern Kung Lao with the razor blades around his hat. See, that's the thing.
I vaguely remember it.
It's one of... So Conquest obviously has a lot of flaws, and it's something I'll probably repeat throughout this episode. One of which is not having its main character at all resemble the video game character he's trying to depict.
Right.
Kung Lao's only defining feature as a character is he has a round-brimmed hat that has a razor edge. A bit like Odd Job, but it's not a bowler hat. It's a wide, more East Asian kind of style. And he throws it like a spinning disc, like a frisbee. He can spin it in his hands vertically and catch you sort of under the sternum with it, and blood sprays everywhere. That was the first time I ever saw Kung Lao in Mortal Kombat 2. I was leaving Legoland. I was probably about 10 years old. And they had a Mortal Kombat 2 arcade machine in Legoland's sort of refectory where you get snacks. And I remember wanting to play on it, my parents not letting me because I wasn't old enough. Yes. And seeing Kung Lao going with his hat like a circular saw cutting someone vertically in half. And in this game he just has in this TV series he has some nicely gelled hair, but he doesn't have his hat because there's barely any blood in this TV show.
Right.
It fails at what Mortal Kombat is most well known for, which is it is a bloody adult fighting game because it's almost prime time TNT. It's
Right,
Well,
and
that
that's
was
what's so. I mean, that's what's so kind of fascinating. Because there was also a Saturday morning kids cartoon for Mortal Kombat called Defenders of the Earth,
Defenders of the Realm.
Defenders of the Realm. And also like it can't do pretty much anything that Mortal Kombat is known for except for having recognizable characters. Um, so Mortal Kombat's in this weird place where its audience is clearly kids, but for legal reasons, they cannot pitch the show as one for kids. So they keep trying to push it into markets where kids might stumble across it without actually. And the times where the closer they get towards the actual market they want to market to, the more they've stripped back the things that kids probably really liked about Mortal Kombat but can't tell their parents. And on top of it, yeah, like it's an era where there is mythology. Like I mentioned with the book has very little actual fighting in it. The Mortal Kombat tournament is referenced, but it does not appear. And the book ends before the tournament actually begins.
Okay, so it's like a world Bible almost.
Kind of, except for it's also wrong and has never been referenced again. So we're in this weird era where soon after this, they will start. NetherRealm Studios will start to actually get a unified mythology together and start to make sure that all the tie-in stuff and video games go in a direct pattern. And to the point now where it's gotten so convoluted that now the video game series has rebooted and the movies have rebooted roughly the same time.
Yeah, I would also put the lack of gore before I leave this subject and this mortal coil, this veil of dreams behind me. I imagine that the lack of gore is also down to the network that it was broadcast on. Yes. TNT was famously averse to violence, which is why WCW was always seen as a more family-friendly wrestling show when compared to WWF. WWF had a lot of, TNA, not the wrestling company, and it also had a lot of hardcore matches in the late 90s. It was the Attitude Era.
Lots of blood,
and WCW was often trying to imitate that or trying to make its own version of that, but was always drawn back into cartoon commercialism because TNT was often being used, or WCW was often being used to promote other things. At the time, WWF was quite self-contained. WCW would have a tie-in to this movie. Glacier, for instance, the WCW wrestler, was Sub-Zero. Yep. Mortis, the WCW wrestler, was pretty much Scorpion. And this was all because there was lots of vested interests, companies like Midway, who were pouring money into WCW saying, can we have our fighter appear on your TV show? But it was always done in this rather family-friendly, homogenous fashion. And so then you get Mortal Kombat immediately following WCW on the TV Guide schedule, and it has to maintain that family-friendly appearance.
Which gave it a bump in ratings, though, because it immediately followed that. Which
can you imagine?
Successful.
Yeah, can you imagine a better slot for a martial arts themed TV show than immediately following one of TV's most popular wrestling shows?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's a one hell of a double bill, which makes it a shame that this show wasn't crafted a little better. But
so, what was the actual reason for cancellation? Because it had the ratings that it needed based on the wrestling show before it, regardless of the quality of the show itself that I've made some jokes about, but I may not really believe because I am known for liking cheese anyway.
It's true.
I mean, it's cheese, isn't it? It isn't bad. It's a TV show that rests pretty firmly in the middle, the 4 out of 10, I would suggest, rather than it's not obnoxiously awful in any respect. But I think when Eddy said we would like to do this Mortal Kombat Conquest genreless episode, I decided I will actually try and find out why exactly it was cancelled. And that's led to me doing more research than was probably ever desired by anyone. Because not only did I look up text interviews, I also started listening to other podcasts where actors and producers and so on from this show all speculated on the cancellation. And I imagine the easiest answer is money, because I'll go through my compiled responses in brief. But Jeff Meek, who played Ryden...
Before you start, I want to point out one thing. Eddie, I want you to delete everything Matthew said up to this point so people don't know how much research he did, because that raises the bar on work that we have to do going forward. No, thank you, Matthew, friend of the show, worker bee.
I am not deleting any of this stuff. It all stays in.
I think it's I wouldn't necessarily advocate doing this level of research. I think it's more a bit between my teeth. I found the hook of a mystery. It's the it's the Yuba County 5 all over again. So Jeff Meek, who played both Raiden and Shao Kahn, said that the producer neglected to put into the budget all of the residuals for the actors. And that was around $2.5 million that nobody wanted to pick up the tab for. So they said, in Jeff Meek's words, screw it. Now, that sounds legitimate to me. I mean, $2.5 million today is pretty much nothing when it comes to the creation of a TV show, because there are TV shows where each episode costs $20 million. I see Severance now, every episode is $20 million, which is frankly obscene. But in the late 90s, having a $2.5 million deficit after people have been paid, and you're basically evaluating the budget for the next season, that could be a bit of a hole, and that figure is speculative. It could have been higher. Dean Barnes, the co-producer of the show, says Warner Brothers Distribution and TNT were unable to sustain market interest in the product for another season, which is a very pat answer, I would suggest, but no reason to doubt it. Adonai Maropis, whose pronunciation I've probably butchered, which is a shame because I think he's one of the best actors in this. He played Quan Chi. Said that he was told that the release of the TV show coincided, I don't think this was planned, with the Columbine shooting. And the network didn't want such a violent TV show running for a second season. Now, that sounds a little hyperbolic. And yet I also know, admittedly, from a remove, that America was very profoundly scarred by the Columbine shooting. And TNT has always been was always a very reactionary TV network.
Yeah.
Ted Turner was very quick to cancel shows whenever he thought, this is going to give me bad press or make my share price dip. Right. So, who knows? Then you got Bruce Locke, Shang Tsung, one of my other favourite actors in this TV show, who is not given nearly enough to do, frankly.
The amount of scenery he chews is exceptional.
I wish he chewed through it, because he's stuck in those damn mines for 22 episodes.
But he's not Matter Eater lad, so he can't chew through it.
Exactly. Everyone's favorite Legion member. See, I know who you're talking about, Chris. So Bruce Locke gives the rather convoluted answer of, we were made by a company called New Line Television. New Line Television was bought by Warner Brothers. And I heard from Chris Casamara, who played Scorpion, that New Line wanted the parent company to pay residuals, while Warner Brothers wanted New Line to pay actor residuals. The question was, who wanted it on their books? The tab was paid and we're still getting residuals. I doubt that now, but I mean, at the time that this interview was conducted. But there was a lot of litigation between parties. If you look into it, you'll find lots of litigation lawsuits over who was responsible for paying the actors, and nobody wanted to foot that bill. So we've got some...
That tracks with Meeks' response, right?
Yeah. Yep. Joshua Wexler, show developer, says its positioning immediately following WCW and TNT resulted in it costing more than anyone wanted to pay to make a second season. Admittedly, he's the show developer, but I don't know that can be the case, that the show that immediately precedes yours dictates the budget that you must have to run your show. It seems a little loose. And Daniel Bernhardt blames Pamela Anderson.
What?
Daniel Bernhardt, who played Ciro, says we were shocked. I'm not sure what the reasons were. Pamela Anderson had a TV show on at the time. I had to look it up. It was VIP.
Is that VIP?
It was.
VIP.
Look at that. Endless useless knowledge. Useless knowledge, full of it.
And we had much better ratings than her. And her show got picked up and ours didn't. I can't imagine why that was. I imagine there were a couple of reasons. But yes, there was a video game. No, Pamela Anderson video game was Barbed Wire.
Barbed Wire, yes.
Not VIP. But yeah, so there's a lot of conjecture.
Oh, that movie was so bad.
It was probably a bit of all of those things, in truth. The one that sounds the most outlandish to me is the Columbine connection, but who knows? Networks cancel things for all manner of godforsaken reasons.
Right. My conspiracy theory is that it probably was actually money, but the combination of how it got down to people was garbled, which is why you get some of the budgetary stuff, and then TNT's excuse for canceling it because they did not want to deal with the lawsuits was the Columbine thing.
Yeah.
Given that it was in the 90s and if it was $2 million or more, that is an exorbitant amount for a television show back then. Not like today.
Particularly, yeah, because, again, talking timeline here, this was not when cable shows were just starting to get slightly prestigious, but only HBO was really doing the cable show as prestige show thing. And even then, that was still in its nascent days. A lot of cable shows were seen as garbage compared to network shows. They were meant to be cheap.
Yeah,
except for Twin Peaks.
Except Twin Peaks. Yeah, I mean that was 10 years prior, and
but even then, people were still trying to replicate that success, right? You know.
Yeah. The closest thing to Conquest in both genre, appearance, production, probably budget is Xena. And
yes, I definitely got Xena vibes off this whole thing.
In the sense that it's historical fantasy, there's a fight in every episode, generally a mystery to solve. Everything looks a little plastic if you look at it a little too closely. So I wonder, though, Xena didn't have the issue of it being a license. You know, Xena was a created article in its own right, and therefore no one was having to worry about paying secondary fees to anyone else, so which means less legality in the background. I could be wrong.
Well, Xena also came off of a successful show, Hercules, which gave them more clout, and they would have had more money, and they would have had more influence.
Right.
I'm trying to think of something on par with that would have been almost a newer IP for most people that, as you were saying, has a license to someone else. And I can't think of anything immediately that comes to mind for that time frame.
Kindred the Embraced. I mean, there are some similarities here. I imagine if Kindred the Embraced had gone a 22 episode run, we would be looking at it in much the same way as Conquest. I don't think it would have found its feet. I know we're revisiting an old episode. I don't think Embraced would have suddenly become household landmark viewing Twin Peaks style.
No.
I think it would have stretched itself so thin by 22 episodes that you would be able to see through it, which is much what Conquest is.
Although that's most shows at the time that have to run anywhere from 20 to 27 episodes if you think about Star Trek. That they're just randomly, this week you meet yourselves, duplicates. You're on another Earth. This week you're stuck in the conference room. Go. 47 minutes.
Yeah, Next Generation and DS9, obviously we all love DS9 here, are buoyed by their best episodes, which makes sense. But to the extent that you can kind of hand wave their filler episodes. Unfortunately, Conquest, Kindred, neither of them really have what you'd consider best episodes. In the same way, you know, like, I don't know, Picard.
I still push back on Kindred. The best episode of Kindred is going to be the one where they unfortunately killed Eddie, if we're going to retread old ground, which would have been their pinnacle episode.
Definitely.
Right. But I mean, right, like how we're structuring TV a lot in this time period is you have strong tentpole episodes that people talk about and the water cooler for a month or so, and then there's a lot of paddling in the pool, just keeping things stringing along to the next big twist episode, right? That is a lot of how late 90s, early 2000s television was made, particularly genre television. So, to start talking a little bit about the actual episode we talked about, like having things like, oh, this is the episode where Scorpion and Sub-Zero fight. So we have a few episodes where we occasionally tease that bits and pieces, like subplots, a few minutes here and there in the background, until you finally build up to that's the big episode everyone talks about. No one talks about the stuff in the middle as more just a way to get to that next big tentpole. So in that regard, yes, like Kindred the Embraced had, the problem is because only 8 episodes, it only got to one of those, which was, killing Eddie Fiore.
And they couldn't have killed actually, they probably could have killed a main character every 5 episodes.
No one knows.
No, well, I think that probably
you could kill Cash, and no one knows Cash is gone.
No, you know what? I think if they had gone to the trouble of killing another character every 5 episodes in Kindred the Embrace, that probably could have. Obviously, it would have had to have run for 20 or more episodes for that to be feasible. But I would have tuned in.
If we're going to really go back and relitigate Kindred the Embrace, if you're going to kill major characters, that creates a sense of uncertainty that would draw audience members in. So they knew that it wasn't a static, stable thing like they would have gotten with Star Trek. Every week, John Luke's still there. God damn, John Luke. Compared to here, the prince, is he going to die this episode? Whew, he made it. Or kill him and then he's replaced.
And I could see an entire season run where like they slowly kill off all the members of the council. And the big twist at the end of season 1 is Julie Luna is removed as prince. Right?
Yeah, now he's just a petty anarch and he's got to punch up at the man.
Right. Or more accurately, he's probably just a venture primogen.
Yeah.
But I mean, then it's now there's somebody else that we don't like as the audience who's now the prince. Now we have to deal with that.
And we root for Julia.
Establishing a person behind each of those primogens seemed like that's where the overall thing was going. So similar to this, like, having a big end of the season episode where like, you're jumping ahead a bit, but like, holy shit, everything has gone terribly. What happens next would have been a draw in. But again, Kindred the Embrace just didn't go that long. So I think Matthew asked me off camera a while back, like, what would have happened if Kindred the Embrace had gone 22 episodes like Conquest? And I honestly think it would look a lot like Conquest. I think Conquest is a bit of an insight into what Kindred the Embrace probably could have been, because it's a very similar time period, very similar budget. They're taking a franchise and adapting a television in a very different way than we would do now. Let's put it that way. And even though one's a soap opera and one's a martial arts show, you could see a lot of commonality, a weirdly high amount of commonality. They both have pretty large casts. They both kill off characters occasionally for shock value. They both have a wide spectrum of acting potential. And they're both doing something that if it were redone today, probably would find a stronger audience. In Mortal Kombat's case, we know that's true because Mortal Kombat Legacy comes out later and does find a stronger audience and does more of what this is clearly trying to do within TNT budget. Vampire hasn't quite done that, but True Blood is more or less Kindred the Embraced, but later on a bigger budget.
I think, if anything, this shows like Kindred the Embraced really highlight how remarkable a show like Twin Peaks, which Chris mentioned, is. They did have cast members. No, it had characters being killed off, of course, but that was far from the only gripping point of that first season. Anyway, but then you got Twin Peaks. You've then got a pretty wide gulf. I'm sure someone will come up with something to fill it, and then you have Oz. And then you have The Sopranos, and you have Lost. That's kind of a 10-year frame of Twin Peaks all the way at the start of the 90s. Not much in between that you could consider a premium drama. Actors at this time thought TV was where you go to die. That was not a good place to make shows. I mean, you didn't have to be an actor. Anyone. Commercials were more appealing than TV shows. And then all of a sudden, of course, HBO starts ramping up its high quality, its prestige dramas with Oz. I think Oz is the first. One could argue NYPD Blue, Homicide, but I but they weren't. They were still not serialized. You could,
where would you put
tune in, drop off.
Babylon 5?
That's an
that's
interesting
another
question.
TNT.
It is.
But Babylon 5 at the time was only way it was really regarded was because this was our version of Star Trek, and so it was kind of kept going because TNT wanted a Star Trek killer, and so they put money into it, and then almost pulled out on season 4, and then changed their minds. So season 5 happened.
What I'm saying, it is a TNT serialized drama. Is the point of it, not so much about whether or not it was profitable, because
well, right. But my point is that Babylon 5 was a bit like Twin Peaks in the sense of, yes, it's pushing the art form forward, but unlike Twin Peaks, was not a cultural phenomenon in its time. It took time for it to retroactively become more of a phenomenon. It had its own fans, obviously, but it wasn't until after it was off the air that people saw it as a piece. And frankly, when it started coming out on DVD and VHS, and people could watch it as a piece, that it started to really find its footing. So and again, that was about the time Matt's talking about where Oz comes out. So people started watching, oh, television can be done this way, and then looking back going, oh, Babylon 5 was already doing that. Now we're recognizing it more.
See, this does make me want to talk about Babylon 5, Farscape, and and other good TV shows. But let's talk about.
We should get to this television show.
All right, to transition back to Mortal Kombat, before we get into the show proper, when you played the game in your youth, who is your character of choice?
Good question. So it probably differed from game to game. In the first game, Scorpion. I think most people would fall on Scorpion. Second game, probably. I think I may have gone to Johnny Cage in the second game. I know he was in the first one, but I liked his moves in the second one. And as for the third, I don't think I really liked the game. I remember playing Cabal a lot, who was a character that hasn't appeared across a huge number of Mortal Kombat games. He's a mask-wearing, hook-wielding maniac. And a lot of fun. But, yeah, Mortal Kombat 3 is all over the place in terms of balance. So I'll put Scorpion as my favourite, I guess, original, OG Mortal Kombat character. But what is so good about Mortal Kombat characters is how visually distinct they are.
Yeah.
I mean, even when it is just a palette swap, the costume is good enough that they are visually distinct, unlike the Virtua Fighters of the time, which is easy to dunk on, where everyone is wearing a gi or is just a shirtless male. There's not much to recommend that. But Mortal Kombat, it is incredibly colourful. Hell, you got Kano, who can shoot lasers out of his eye.
I know, right?
And who, the movie made him Australian. Do you know the story about Kano's? Obviously, Kano, everyone assumes he's Australian.
But it's because the actor made that choice in the movie. I know a little bit about the movie, so not too much about the series.
But I don't think the actor was Australian.
He wasn't.
Was he?
No, he just wanted to play it that way.
I think he was trying to do a Cockney accent, and it came across as Australian. And
is that because, much like in the animated cartoon, that actor who played Wolverine suddenly went Australian instead of Canadian?
Struth, mate. But it's one of those interesting genesis points for a meme, I suppose. What became canonical just because everyone was quoting Kano with an Australian accent. I'll cut him from ear to ear. Chris is frozen right now, but can we still hear him?
I am unfrozen.
Excellent. All right.
We had a little freeze there, people, so we'll see if that stays in and what happens. Eddie, since I don't know what happened before, who is your character choice before we jump into this proper, as we're almost an hour into the show now, before we talk about the episode?
And we have 4 episodes to get through. It might be a 2-parter. We don't know. But I generally play Sonya Blade. Partially because her back kick reach actually has a really long reach. And least in 2, she's actually one of the more powerful characters.
She's not into
Not
Eddie.
2, 1.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, it's is it 2 or 1? I forget which one. I know in 3 she was debuffed, but I forgot what she learned to.
Mortal Kombat pedant over here.
Right, thank you.
I think you'll find she's in the background of 2, chained up to a post.
That's right, yeah, because that's why Jack's there to rescue her. That's right.
I want everyone to know, literally, as Matthew was saying that to Eddie, schooling him, he pushed up his glasses. I don't know if it was intentional or it was subconscious, but that is what just happened, and I'm making sure everyone of our 40-odd listeners know.
Let the mystery be, Chris.
Who did you play, Chris?
So I liked Liu Kang, but I would say Johnny Cage. I love the little move that he did. He kicks his leg out and he kind of goes doo 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 doo.
Yeah, like it's a shadow kick, I think.
Shadow
it was.
kick, yeah.
So I'm a Johnny come lately.
Hey. And did you start with Mortal Kombat 1, Chris?
I do not remember because, unlike you two, I'm not a big Mortal Kombat fan. I played a little bit here and there, and I knew about the movie. I think I liked Soul Calibur was probably the game I liked the best.
Yeah, that was great fun. No movie made of that, though, is there?
No. Honestly, I would love to see Soul Calibur movie. That would be awesome.
I think it would be a horrible mess, and I'd still love to see it.
Oh yeah, no. It would be good. Right.
All right, but we're here to talk about Warrior Eternal Part 1,
but not
the story
of
Jin.
Right. All right. I'll start. I'll do the summary. It begins with the great Kung Lao training in private, while Shang Tsung in battle defeats another opponent and steals his soul. Before entering the ring, Kung Lao received a speech from Raiden, God of Thunder and Protector of the Earth Realm. The battle begins. Kung Lao, the Earth Warrior, fights Shang Tsung, the Outworld Sorcerer. Losing, Shang Tsung begins to take his soul, looking inside himself. Try again. Losing, Shang Tsung begins to take his soul, but Kung Lao, looking inside of himself, receives encouragement from his girlfriend, Jen Rayland. Now, believing he could win, he stops Shang Tsung's soul stealing and defeats him.
Wait, I'm sorry, Eddie. I'm sorry. I never put that together until hearing you say it out loud. Please proceed.
Yeah, I do like it. She sounds like his girlfriend from down in the valley, Jen Rayland.
Well, it's over here. Might as well. Instead of killing him, Kung Lao decides to let Shang Tsung live. But it's a good stopping point because, it's just like we're in the middle of it starts with a fight, which already miles out of the novel, so he's got that going for it. And then I'm about to die, but then I see my girlfriend's in the worst acting I think I've seen in quite a while, and she's basically wearing 2 pieces of clothing or 2 scraps of fabric over her.
Yeah.
I'm like, please don't.
When I
rewatched
this for the sake of this podcast, I forgot about her existence. So
that's smart.
When I saw Kung Lao's vision of Jen, I thought, is this supposed to be a goddess? Is this supposed to be like someone reaching out from across the realms, intervening, say, "No, Kung Lao, you must fight for Earthrealm." But no, it's just he's got the horn, which is a recurring. Okay, no, it's his heartbeats for Jen. But I have to say,
true
Jen,
love.
Yeah, I have to say, as far as monks go, Kung Lao isn't very monkish.
No.
As we're going to find. I don't know what the principles are or the tenets are for Kung Lao's monastic tradition, but I ain't ever met monks like that.
Right.
Who put quite so much clay in their hair.
Well, things were different in the year, whatever year this is.
In the of Jiju.
When you're the defender of Earthrealm, you get special perks that other people don't get.
Yeah,
right.
Makeup table and hair products. As many hair products as you can eat, Kung Lao.
To focus back on the thing, the fact that he can shrug off the ability to have his soul absorbed, is that seen before any of the books or anything that you know from the media?
No, well, not in the video game, that's for sure, because it's a fatality. There's no partial soul removal in the video game. It's just Shang Tsung, your soul is mine.
As a fan,
your soul is his.
How did you feel about that, honestly? looking at it from a fan perspective.
I mean, it sets up Kung Lao as the chosen one, which he very much is supposed to be, at least up to a point. And when we get to that episode, I will have a bit of a rant about it. But the fact that he is able, through the power of love, baby, to deter or rebuke Shang Tsung's ability is fine. That's okay. Now, what armchair directing or armchair screenwriting here, I would have had Shang Tsung see Jen as well. And then not fall in love with her necessarily, though that could have been a thing. But no, this is his weakness. This is how I get to the heart of Kung Lao.
Right.
Or rather, this is his shield. If I destroy this Jen Ryland from down in the valley, I will be able to decapitate Kung Lao, the defender of Earthrealm.
Right. And like, because this is a prequel, although we have no clue that this is what it is when we start watching it. You could argue also that Shang Tsung's powers aren't quite as strong as they would be in the games that we're playing. So like maybe he shrugged off because Shang Tsung's not quite as strong of a sorcerer either. I can kind of sort of squint and look past it from here. But it's interesting that basically this show begins with the end of the last Mortal Kombat tournament. So
yeah,
the name of the show is a thing you're not going to see for the vast majority of it. You're not going to see the tournament.
Well, yeah. Here's my the greatest gap in my Mortal Kombat knowledge, and there are many of them. Is I don't know how regularly Mortal Kombat tournaments take place, but let's say they take place once every 100 years. It's
every 10 generations, right?
Every 10 generations.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, let's be very generous with life expectancy and say once every 800 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is the rule that if you participate in Mortal Kombat and Shang Tsung, servant of Shao Kahn, kills you, your realm becomes part of Outworld?
Yes.
Because that's the indication I get. So we're saying that every single person that loses is representing
are you supposed to lose
realm?
10 battles in a row, then it becomes theirs? I thought it was there's some sort of tens dynamic they're playing with.
So as I understand it, again, this has shifted quite a bit over the years, but as I understand it, basically is that once every 10 generations there's a tournament, and the winner of the tournament, if you're from Earthrealm, you stop aging until the next tournament.
Okay.
You get buy into the next tournament, but you also don't age until the next tournament.
Right.
Which is why, this Kung Lao is not quite the next Kung Lao, but could theoretically be. It's vague at this point. If Shang Tsung wins, then he's getting enough souls to eventually, over the course of time, will be able to open the gateway to then invade Earthrealm, right? So they don't automatically get Earthrealm by winning the tournament. He gets the souls of the warriors that he can then use to enact to allow them to invade Earthrealm.
I didn't pick up on that at all. It felt very much like an Earthrealm surprise.
It's not in the show whatsoever. No, this involves reading other documents to get to that.
Yeah, it felt like the competitors were representing a realm, and if you lose, your realm is basically taken by the Khan, essentially.
That is because that's Mortal Kombat 1. So I think what happened is that after Mortal Kombat 1, when Liu Kang wins, then it's well now you have another tournament, and it's going to be next year.
Oh, okay.
Because the other realms got their plans to drop this. Was like, no, so they started accelerating the timeline. And then after 2, I think 3 was, okay, well, now because 2 is set in other realm.
Outworld, yeah.
Outworld, yeah. It has different names. Yes, Outworld. It's set in Outworld. And say, fine, we're going to have a tournament here. It's not in violation of the rules because it's not an Earth realm. And then I say, fuck it, no, we're doing it in Earth. We're doing it now. And this one's for all the marbles. If we lose, we invade.
Which is why Mortal Kombat 3 seems to be set in the future.
Right, because 10, which I've been playing recently, is after an invasion by that realm, and because they just said, screw it, we don't care about the rule anymore. We're just going to invade.
Well,
Aren't there supposed to be outer gods or something that's keeping everything in line to why they do these competitions?
Raiden is one of them. Shinnok. Now we're deep in the fucking lore. Shinnok was the one that was stopping this, and then I forget who, but someone kills Shinnok.
No, Shinnok turns evil in Mortal Kombat
turns evil. That's
4. Right. I think it turns out he's been the puppet master behind all of this. But this is getting very much into the weeds, isn't it?
Right.
But yes, to participate, Raiden has to turn mortal, which of course he does at the end of the TV show, but it doesn't work out well.
Right.
But to a slight tangent. So if you're looking to make a Mortal Kombat game or TV series and you need writers and experts, both Matthew and Eddie are available for hire at a very high rate.
I don't know
and
about that.
Their agent,
There's a reason why I got rebooted. Let's put it that way. Because it's super fucking convoluted.
Yes, only one writer can win. Fight.
Yeah, right.
Test your right.
Winning tournaments leaves Earthrealm safe for another generation. Following Kung Lao's victory, Raiden reveals to him that as the last defending warrior of Earthrealm, he is charged with training a new army of warriors to compete against Shao Kahn's henchmen in future rounds of Mortal Kombat. Unfortunately for Kung Lao, this wasn't what he had in mind. He figured after defending the Earthrealm, he'd be able to go on his life as it was before Mortal Kombat.
We don't know what that life was.
Right. Whatever.
Being a monk,
irrelevant.
I guess.
Two big parts of his life are the Temple of the Order of Light, which trained Kung Lao to be a warrior, and Jen Rylands, a local baron's daughter.
Well, hey.
So during the week that the Order was celebrating the victory in Mortal Kombat, Jen, accompanied by her bodyguard Zero, went to make an offering to the temple and its fighters. On the road, they're met by three monks turned out to be highway bandits trying to rob them. Luckily for Jen, but not for the bandits, Zero is a master martial artist who not only defended Jen, but also took one of the bandits, Taja, prisoner. Taja eventually became a servant in Baron Raylan's household.
Now, this is... Yes, Chris, you go for it.
This has my biggest issue with the entire show right here. I mean, like, special effects aside, dubious acting choices at some points. The fighting here, the fact that bandits on the road are on par with our champions throughout the entire course of the show is disturbing. Because at that point, I could become the champion of Earthrealm, and that would just be scary for all of us.
And that's what you need to believe, Chris. You could become the champion of Earthrealm if you just tried a little harder. No. What it's demonstrating is Shang Tsung as a scrub, and no one else in the various realms is much better than that. I think if I was to ad hoc come up with a way that the fighters are stronger during the Mortal Kombat, it is basically their senses, their abilities are heightened while participating in these fights, which is why you can suddenly throw fireballs and so on. But when you return to your realm, you are just a martial artist. It is more about heart and will than it is about strength of arm. Which don't tell Jax that because he's all about strength of arm.
Your rewrite would work for this series because it was with that true love that he threw off the effects of the soul draining. But it's not in this show. Random Thug can take on Champion for 5 minutes of screen time.
Yep, and then as we cut to the commercial break, our champion may die at the hands of random bandit. I mean, it's role-playing 101, though. They are going from town to temple, 3 bandits, test your might, your level 1 monk.
You would have more than these bandits to fight that level 1 character if you wanted to give them a challenge. It's not like 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, I'm engaging with the main character, threatening their existence.
Well, wait until you get to the last episode, Chris, because you're really going to show up how fantastic these named characters are. This is the scene where we first see Zero in action.
Yep.
And it is worth noting that I believe, he is one of maybe 3 actors in this who performs their own stunts. As I mentioned before, Daniel Bernhardt is a stunt performer as well as an actor. I think he's a stunt coordinator now at that. Because he has been in the business for a while. He is, from all accounts, not only an incredibly talented individual, an incredibly nice man. Daniel Bernhardt is a Swiss actor who has been in, I guess, the US for probably the large part of his professional life. And he exemplifies the roundhouse kick, crescent kick, somersault, kip up maneuver that every fighter uses in this TV show in various combinations. So remember those for listeners. We have roundhouse kick, crescent kick, somersault, kip up. Now, you could put those in any order, and you would have summarized a fight in Mortal Kombat Conquest.
Right.
I forgot that, Eddie, didn't at one point in time you tell us about the basic moves that are used in either stunt fighting or stunt sword fighting?
Sword fighting, yeah.
That are constantly repeated.
Yeah, sword fighting is somewhere like if you will see the two actors will the cross swords to the top, the cross swords to the bottom, the cross swords to the top, and then one person will miss. And if once you see it, you see that pattern in a lot of amateur sword fighting, particularly amateur. Like when you get to movies that have a strong stunt choreography, you get much better sword fighting. But like if sword like a Shakespearean play or whatnot, you get lots of the cross miss, cross miss, and you can't unsee it once you see it. This is kind of similar that it's okay, I could teach any actor, any stunt person these 4 moves, and we can have a decent fight scene. And then we'll just do lots of editing to make it look more exciting.
Before you move on, I want to touch on the 2 points of his life. You mentioned that one of them was studying at the Temple of Order and Light to prepare to become a warrior. If you're studying and training to be a warrior, wouldn't you know that post-tournament, win or lose, you're still doing this for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Is that not part of the 101?
He does moan about that a fair amount in the course of this show, and Raiden very cattily comes back at him and says, well, just give up then. Why don't you just quit then?
Right. I mean, when the first episode, I was like, that seems like a huge omission. After watching the rest of the show, Raiden is an asshole. So,
he's fantastic.
I mean, he's lovely to watch, but also like I completely believe he was like, oh shit, did I forget to mention that you're doing this for the rest of eternity? Fuck, yeah. I'm sorry, man.
Until you die, until someone finally beats you. I quite like the idea of that eternal champion, tragic eternal champion, Moorcock style, that you have got to basically keep defending your honor, your title until someone comes along and kills you. It's a decent conceit. In terms of Raiden being an asshole, I think a lot of that is channeling Christopher Lambert's Raiden from the first movie, not Bruce Remar's Raiden from Mortal Kombat Annihilation, when his face
James Remar is amazing. He was the warrior, and then he went on to become Black Lightning's sidekick and tech guy. Come on.
And Dexter's dad. But yeah, I've got nothing against James Remar. I'm not suggesting, however, that he was an adequate Japanese god of thunder. In fact, I would suggest
do we really want to go there?
3.
Thank you.
I do, however, accept a god can take whatever form that he, she, they chooses.
Funny that he always shoots a white guy, though.
I know. I mean, he knows his crowd, Chris. That's the thing. But I like that Raiden is a bit of a trickster god as well, because it would be very boring if he was Zeus on a mountain, to choose another thunder god, who is just booming down commands and offering pearls of wisdom. Raiden's pearls of wisdom always come with barbs.
If he was Zeus, it would be a different kind of movie. It's one that we couldn't show kids because that's all Zeus did in his spare time.
Right.
But there are episodes of this, I don't know if we watched any, where Raiden is very much a tomcat, shall we say. He is constant. Well, and who can blame him with this setup? But let's carry on.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
No.
Anyway, So turning his back on his destiny, the great Kung Lao asks for Jin's hand in marriage, but is quickly rebuffed by the Baron, who states that Kung Lao's association with the temple and the elder gods and realms is not a suitable lifestyle for his only daughter.
He's the champion of Mortal Kombat, for goodness sake.
It's like, what do you want, man?
But what I like about this is, and I say this tongue in cheek because it's fucking awful, this part. So Baron Rayland, he looks like a dad from a 1980s American family sitcom.
Yes.
And he sounds like one as well. Yes. He has the you're not worthy of dating my daughter, throws Kung Lao out to the curb, quite almost literally, except he gets his bodyguard to do it. I can kind of sympathize or empathize with Baron Raylan, because while he does have the rather, let's call it, unfashionable view of declaring his daughter his property, he does also remind Kung Lao, you are a monk. Ergo, you shouldn't be marrying my daughter. Remember who you are, Kung Lao. But then, oddly, says that Mortal Kombat is a delusion. He says, I don't believe any of this deluded nonsense about Mortal Kombat and gods, which led me to think, is all of this clandestine then? Is Mortal Kombat unknown to the populace? Because if so, there are an awful lot of people that do know about it, who aren't supernatural in nature. And is Raiden, so I only thought this in the first episode, is Raiden visible to other people, or can he only act as a guide to someone who is a defender of the realm?
Right.
Now, in later episodes, Raiden is lounging around with women in hot pants, so that's clearly not the case.
Right.
But at least at this early point, it does set up an interesting masquerade style. This is a hidden mission I have, essentially, that I can't share with anyone. Again, it's something they could have built into a plot.
Right,
I look at almost like the Force, for when people are talking about in Star Wars, how the Force doesn't exist. It's like this thing that's not real, but they know that it's part of their universe. They just don't understand it, so they dismiss it.
Which is a shame. It's a shame they don't do more shows where the Force is a myth instead of throwing it in our fucking faces over and over again. But anyway, that's a different episode.
Right. But I mean that's a really valid point, right? Is that the Baron sets up this interesting concept of, is this a secret? Because the first Mortal Kombat game, it was a secret tournament, and the movie implied it was a secret tournament. But yet, pretty quickly, Kung Lao's turning around Mortal Kombat like everyone fucking knows it, and everyone does know. So
yeah,
the concept falls apart real fast.
And part of it could be that as a dad, if I know that you're a monk and you're fighting a secret legion of people, I don't want you to marry my daughter. That puts her in instant danger.
Well,
so it gets me on the Baron's side for about 10 seconds before he becomes an abusive creeper to Taja, who they've captured, and he's trying to put moves on her.
Yeah.
Right.
He rejects fruit in favor of forcing himself on Taja.
Yeah.
He must be one of these carnivore diet people, I guess.
Wow. Because he's an alpha male, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm making it political. As if he needed more weight ladled on top of him.
Right. Meanwhile, in the cobalt mines of Shao Kahn, Shang Tsung has taken up with the vile she prisoner Vorpax.
She prisoner.
Vorpax.
Who is this she prisoner?
While neither can be trusted, they need one another, as Shang Tsung still has his powers of sorcery but cannot leave the mines because it's a cheaper set that way. And Vorpax, not as powerful as her partner, is able to cross through portals into other realms to carry out his evil deeds. In his first strike against Kung Lao, Shang Tsung enlists the deadly warrior Scorpion to visit the Earth realm and begin his revenge.
Now, this is an interesting part that ties into canon.
Yeah.
Because Takeda is Scorpion's mortal form in Mortal Kombat mythos, and they went to the trouble of having one of the Baron's bodyguards actually be Takeda.
Yep.
Be cursed with the scorpion, which I think was a black scorpion with a painted yellow stripe down it. When I looked at it in this episode, I'm sure they conform to all kind of guidelines, but it was just a black scorpion with a yellow stripe painted down it to make it appear like a ninja. So yes, Takeda is cursed into becoming Scorpion by Shang Tsung, which is all absolutely fine. That is, I've got no problem there.
No.
Where I kind of have a problem is Vorpax. So Vorpax is a character made up for this TV show. And it's all right. You can have characters made up for the TV shows who don't appear in the video games. And bear in mind the sheer lack of female characters in the Mortal Kombat series. They would have been rooting around rather for Sonya, Kitana, or Melina to put her in with Shang Tsung at this point. But it also completely nullifies Shang Tsung's ability. To the point I joked about earlier, for the course of 22 episodes, there are a few where he escapes the mines, but he always ends up back there.
Yeah.
It would be a bit like in He-Man if Skeletor was confined to Snake Mountain.
Right.
You end up losing a lot of what makes Shang Tsung interesting. And all credit to Bruce Locke for keeping him interesting as a performer, because yes, he chews the scenery. Yes, everything is through clenched teeth and spat out. But he is, I think, one of the strongest presences in the TV show. He uplifts every scene he's in, despite it. So, despite it being the same fucking set every time.
I know that you mentioned that they created 4-packs, but didn't they also create Taja and Zero?
They did indeed. Again, another choice which, on the face of it, seems very odd. The only way it can make sense again is if we consider this Kung Lao, the original Kung Lao, the one who's never appeared in any of the video games. And therefore we have to assume that these other defenders of the realm will die before the first Mortal Kombat game, which all comes to fruition. Yeah, that all works out. But what a hell of a gambit to put down. 22 episodes of prologue. It's an odd way to go, because there's talk of if they had done a second season, it would have aligned with the games. It would have introduced characters like Liu Kang. But then again, there's other people who worked on it who said, oh, no, this sorceress who appears in the last couple of episodes would have resurrected Kung Lao and things like that. So it's...
Since you're now talking about the finale, I will go ahead and share one of the things that I think that I saw is that originally one of their ideas was also they're going to pull a Dallas or Newhart and have it all be a dream.
Yeah.
Oh God.
But this is a show.
Kung Lao wakes up, season 2, episode 1. That was a bad dream.
Yes, Jen.
Jen's next to him in the bed.
She steps out of the shower.
No, just the last 2 episodes where we get like the gripping finale.
That's a shame. What a shame Jen couldn't come back.
What a shame.
So, yes, do continue. Sorry.
Well, I mean, the rest of the episode is basically Shang Tsung manipulates Scorpion to try to thwart Jen and Kung Lao's plans, elopement to go off and get married. Kung Lao gets captured by the Baron's guard, sentenced to death, and Zero is disgraced and punished.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like you're fucking dead. Zero, who was actually part of the Baron's household, he gets disgraced and banished for having the audacity to help a guy out.
Yeah.
And that's
he helped out Kung
evidence.
Lao against the Baron's wishes. It's all right. I do think the budget was probably... In fact, I wrote beforehand, I think this is the episode where the budget went. I don't know that holds true.
Yeah.
Because there isn't anything that spectacular about the set dressing, shall we say, in Warrior Eternal Part 1. It probably has one of the greatest ranges of characters with speaking parts, so that's more people to pay. So because it wants to establish the world, it has fight scenes where there is an active crowd, the ones at the very beginning, Shang Tsung versus Kung Lao. So yeah, you've got a very different setup there. I think one of the strangest parts of this episode was when Zero gets dismissed by the Baron for helping his daughter elope with Kung Lao. The Baron says, Takeda will be my personal consort.
Yeah.
And it's a strange use of words, and Takeda seems to accept that role willingly. And I assume that was Zero's role before.
Right.
So Zero may be only too happy to escape those duties.
Right, and it's like on the one hand, it's like I think you mean champion, but the other hand, you do you, man. If that's how your household works, I'm
not judging. I just found it came out of left field slightly.
Yeah.
I will point out before we move on that the Baron, in one sense, regardless of what a reprehensible person he was right in that fact that his daughter, being with Kung Lao, did die because of his duties as an Earthrealm defender. So
yes. Did you go on to watch the second episode then?
I
despite it
endured it
being one of our
so I could
profiles.
finish it in case we wanted to talk about it.
Ah.
Because that is my dedication to the podcast. I will not do the endless hours of research that Matthew did. I will torture myself for 45 minutes.
Could you synopsize the second episode for us then?
That's
They
basically
rescue Liu Kang. Scorpion kills Jin. Yada yada yada. There you go.
Yeah, and the Baron dies as well.
The Baron dies, and
Yes.
Kaja does sign up with Zero, so she become the other series lead.
Yeah.
And there's an obnoxiously long wait before he asks Zero to join. Zero's like, well, I don't have a job anymore. And Kung Lao is sort of waiting and looking off in the distance. It's like, I still don't have a job. It's like, all right, you can become a champion too.
I enjoy Bernhardt's accent, which I guess is just his accent. It's not one I can imitate very well, but in a lot of episodes, he does this. Now I'm going to sit here and just drink until you ask me to do something. And so there's a lot of Daniel Bernhardt playing drunk Zero, which I think is supposed to be like his vice. I think he is supposed to have a bit of an alcohol problem, which, again, it's nice that they're trying to give these characters flaws. I say these characters, this one character.
Well, I mean,
Kaja is a thief and has sort of kleptomania, and he is a drunkard. So you've given them like a personality trait.
Right.
I don't think
Kung Lao is pride. Kung Lao is prideful, right? So I mean, like they each have one of the classic sins.
Yeah. And Raiden is a lusty old horn dog.
Right. I mean, so it is color by numbers drama.
Yeah.
But it's slightly more than I expected in this cheap TNT series based off a fighting game, right?
That followed a wrestling show. I want to like reinforce that's what it's supposed to do. So you've got to paint by the numbers for the audience that you have, because you'll have families watching, and then they'll transition to this show. For the dads, it could be a little skimpy with people, or moms could be a little skimpy for people. For kids, there's action, feet kicking at faces that don't touch, and some people go, "Oh, I'm supposed to move now," and they fall out of the way. But as a kid, it's awesome.